The day Naomi Foster's world shattered began with the thunderous pounding of a marshal's fist on her door. The spring of 1876 had barely settled over Willow Creek when everything she'd built came crashing down around her. Standing in her modest dress shop with fabric swatches in hand, she couldn't have imagined how quickly her reputation would unravel, or that the man who'd eventually believe her would be the same dusty cowboy she'd dismissed as just another drifter passing through town. "Miss Foster." "Open up in the name of the law," the marshal's voice boomed through the wooden door, causing her scissors to clatter to the floor. Naomi smoothed her dark blue skirt, tucking a loose strand of chestnut hair behind her ear as she moved to answer. Her heart hammered against her ribs, though she couldn't fathom why the law would be at her door. "Marshal Dawson," she greeted, noting the hard set of his jaw and the cluster of townsfolk gathered behind him. "What brings you here today? I think you know well enough, Miss Foster." His eyes, normally kind when he ordered shirts for his wife, had turned to steel. "You're to come with me to answer some questions about the missing funds from the Founders' Day Celebration Committee." Naomi's mouth went dry. "Missing funds? I don't understand." $500 gone from the lockbox," called out Mrs. Hargrove, the banker's wife, from behind the marshal. "And you were the last one with the key." "That's impossible," Naomi protested, her voice rising. "I returned that key to Mr. Pullman directly after counting the donations." "That's not what Mr. Pullman says," Marshal Dawson replied firmly. "He claims you kept it an extra day and now the money's gone." The accusations hit her like physical blows. As treasurer of the committee, she'd been responsible for collecting donations for the upcoming celebration, but she'd been meticulous with every penny. "I never kept that key," she insisted, "and I certainly didn't take any money," but her words fell on deaf ears. In the following hours, as she sat in Marshal Dawson's office, the story against her grew. Mr. Pullman, the most respected businessman in town and head of the committee, presented a ledger showing discrepancies he claimed were in her handwriting. Mrs. Hargrove testified she'd seen Naomi leaving the bank after hours. Even Reverend Collins suggested gently that perhaps she'd borrowed the funds temporarily, intending to replace them. They all had known her for 3 years since she'd arrived in Willow Creek and opened her dress shop. They'd smiled at her in church, commissioned dresses and shirts, invited her to socials. Yet now they looked at her as though she were a stranger, a thief. "I've never stolen anything in my life," Naomi declared, fighting back tears as the marshal released her with a warning not to leave town while they sorted things out. But sorting things out meant watching her customers disappear, her orders dry up, and whispers follow her down the street. Within a week, the story had transformed. Now, according to town gossip, she'd been embezzling for months, using the money to order fancy fabrics from back east while claiming modest profits. What hurt most was understanding why they believed Mr. Pullman over her. He was a founding father of Willow Creek, with a magnificent home on the hill and connections throughout the territory. His wife organized the church socials. His son was courting the mayor's daughter. The Pullmans were Willow Creek's royalty. Naomi was just a woman who'd arrived alone on the stagecoach 3 years earlier. Her past a mystery she preferred not to discuss. The knock that came on her shop door 10 days after the accusations was gentler than the marshal's had been, but Naomi approached cautiously nonetheless. She hadn't had a customer since the allegations began. "Shop's closed," she called through the door. "Not looking for a new shirt, madam," came a deep voice she didn't recognize. "Name's Owen Reid. Here you might be in need of someone who's good at finding truth in unlikely places." Curious despite herself, Naomi cracked open the door. The man standing on her porch was tall and broad-shouldered, with sun-weathered skin and eyes the color of a summer sky. Dust covered his denim pants and cotton shirt, and his dark hat bore the stains of hard travel. "I don't recall asking for help, Mr. Reid," she said stiffly. "No, madam, you didn't." He shifted, and she noticed the gentle way he held himself despite his imposing size. "But I overheard some talk at the saloon about a woman being accused of theft without much evidence. Got me wondering." "And why would that concern you?" His eyes met hers directly. Because I've seen what happens when powerful men decide someone's story doesn't matter. Been on the wrong side of that myself. Naomi hesitated, then opened the door wider. I can't pay you for whatever you're offering. Not asking for payment. He removed his hat, revealing dark hair that curled slightly at his temples. Just looking to see justice done, if that's agreeable to you. She should have sent him away. A lone woman inviting a strange man into her shop would only fuel more gossip. But Naomi was desperate, and something about Owen Reid's steady gaze made her want to trust him. Come in then, she said, stepping aside, but I should warn you helping me won't make you any friends in Willow Creek. His mouth curved into a slight smile. Never been much good at making friends anyway, Miss Foster. As Owen stepped into her shop, Naomi couldn't have known this dusty cowboy would become her defender, her confidant, and eventually, the man who would build her a home where her truth would finally be enough. Owen listened without interruption as Naomi explained everything: how she'd been appointed treasurer of the Founders' Day Committee, how she'd meticulously recorded every donation, and how she'd returned the key to the lockbox to Mr. Pullman the very same day she'd finished collecting. It doesn't make sense, she said, pacing between bolts of fabric. Why would they think I'd steal? I've worked hard to build this business honestly. Owen's eyes tracked her movement. Sometimes it's not about what makes sense, it's about what's convenient. Convenient, Naomi stopped pacing. If money's gone, someone took it. If it wasn't you, then. He let the implication hang in the air. Naomi's eyes widened as understanding dawned. You think someone else stole it and I'm being blamed to protect the real thief? Owen nodded slowly. Tell me about this Mr. Pullman. What kind of man is he? Respected. Wealthy. His mercantile supplies most of the territory. He helped found this town 20 years ago after striking it rich in the gold fields. She hesitated. He's always been cordial to me, though his wife tends to haggle over every penny when ordering dresses. And this ledger, he claims, shows discrepancies. Have you seen it? Only briefly. Marshall Dawson showed it to me, but when I tried to explain those weren't my notations, he seemed to think I was lying about that too. Owen rose from his chair, settling his hat back on his head. I'll need to look into a few things. Might take some time. What will you do? Naomi asked, suddenly nervous about what this stranger might stir up on her behalf. Just ask some questions, listen more than I talk. He moved toward the door, then paused. Is there anyone in town still speaking to you? Anyone who hasn't turned against you? Naomi thought about it. Old Mrs. Winters. She comes for tea every Wednesday, accusations or not, and perhaps Dr. Parker. He nodded to me yesterday when others crossed the street to avoid me. Good. Stay close to those who still treat you with respect. His expression softened. And Miss Foster, lock your door at night. Sometimes when people start believing lies, they look for ways to make those lies feel true. With that cryptic warning, Owen left, his spurs jingling softly as he walked down the wooden steps of her porch. Naomi stood in the doorway watching his retreating figure, wondering if she'd just made a terrible mistake or found her only ally in a town that had decided she was guilty without a trial. That night she added an extra bolt to her door, just in case Owen Reid's warning held more truth than she wanted to admit. The next morning, Naomi woke to the sound of whispers outside her shop. Peering through the curtains, she saw a small crowd gathered, pointing at her door. Heart racing, she hurried downstairs to find crude letters painted across the wooden planks. Thief. Her hands trembled as she fetched water and a rag, working quickly to remove the paint before it dried completely. As she scrubbed, she felt eyes watching from windows and doorways, but no one came to help. Here, let me assist you with that. The voice startled her. She turned to find Dr. Parker rolling up his sleeves, his kind face creased with concern. You shouldn't have to clean this alone, he said quietly, taking the rag from her hands. Thank you, she whispered, blinking back tears, but they'll talk about you for helping me. Let them talk. He scrubbed vigorously at a stubborn spot. I've lived in this town long enough to know how quickly people jump to conclusions. Remember when they thought the Miller boy had typhoid and nearly burned down his family's barn? Despite everything, Naomi smiled, and it turned out he'd just eaten too many green apples. Exactly, Doctor Parker handed back the rag. People fear what they don't understand, and sometimes it's easier to believe the worst than to ask difficult questions. Together they removed most of the paint, though a faint outline remained visible. As the doctor was leaving, he paused. "Miss Foster, I don't believe you took that money, but whoever did has influence in this town. Be careful." "I will," she promised, touched by his kindness. Later that afternoon, as Naomi was inventorying what little fabric she had left, wondering how long she could keep her shop open with no customers, the bell above her door jingled. Owen Reid entered, looking even more dusty than the day before, his expression unreadable. "You've been busy," she observed, noticing a fresh cut above his eyebrow. "Had some conversations," he replied, removing his hat. "Not all of them friendly." "I can see that," she gestured to the cut. "Sit down and let me clean that for you." He hesitated only briefly before settling into a chair by her work table. As she dampened a clean cloth and gently dabbed at the wound, she caught the scent of leather and open prairie that clung to him. "What did you discover?" she asked. "Pullman's son has gambling debts in Silver Creek." "Significant ones." Owen's eyes, startlingly blue up close, held steady on hers. "And 3 weeks ago he bought passage on a coach headed west, left town just before the money went missing." Naomi's hand stilled. "You think James Pullman took the money? But why would his father blame me instead of just replacing it himself?" "That's what I'm still figuring out." Owen winced slightly as she pressed the cloth to his cut. "But I did learn something interesting from the bank clerk. Seems Pullman's investments in the new railroad haven't paid off as expected. He's not as wealthy as he appears. So he couldn't replace the money without drawing attention to his financial troubles," Naomi reasoned, stepping back to examine her handiwork on his forehead. "And a scandal involving his son would damage the family name worse than his finances." Naomi set the cloth aside, her mind racing. "But how do we prove any of this? No one will take my word over his. We need evidence, something that connects Pullman or his son to the missing money." Owen stood, his height making her small shop seem even smaller. "And we need to be careful. That cut wasn't an accident. Pullman's friends don't appreciate my questions." Concern flickered across Naomi's face. "Perhaps you should stop. I don't want you getting hurt because of me." "Too late for that, Miss Foster." His expression softened slightly. "Besides, I've had worse than a scratch from men more dangerous than merchants with secrets." "Why are you really helping me?" she asked suddenly. "The truth, Mr. Reid." He was quiet for a long moment, studying her with those summer sky eyes. 8 years ago, my sister was accused of stealing jewelry from the family she worked for in Denver. She swore she was innocent, but no one believed her over the word of a judge's wife. What happened to her? "She died in prison waiting for a trial that kept getting delayed." His voice remained steady, but Naomi saw the pain flash in his eyes. "I was working cattle drives in Texas, didn't even know she was in trouble until it was too late." "I'm so sorry," Naomi whispered. "So am I." He settled his hat back on his head. "Which is why I can't walk away from someone else being wrongfully accused, not when I have the chance to do something about it." As he moved toward the door, Naomi called after him, "Mr. Reid, thank you for believing me when no one else would." He turned, the ghost of a smile touching his lips. "Get some rest, Miss Foster. Tomorrow we start gathering evidence that even Marshall Dawson can't ignore." After Owen left, Naomi stood in the center of her empty shop, feeling hope stir for the first time since the accusations began. She wasn't alone anymore. Someone believed her. Someone was fighting for her truth. That night, she slept without nightmares for the first time in days. Owen spent the next several days methodically building his case. He befriended the young clerk at the bank, visited the telegraph office to confirm when messages had been sent to James Pullman, and even rode to Silver Creek to verify the gambling debts at a saloon where James was known to play cards. Each evening, he would stop by Naomi's shop to share what he'd learned, sometimes bringing food when he noticed her supplies dwindling. She would make them tea, and they would sit at her small table planning their next steps. Naomi found herself looking forward to these visits more than she cared to admit. There was something reassuring about Owen's presence, his quiet confidence. his careful attention to detail, the way he listened to her as though her words mattered. One evening, as rain pattered against the windows, Owen spread out notes he'd taken on scraps of paper. James Pullman lost over $600 at cards the week before the money went missing, he explained. The saloon owner in Silver Creek said he promised to return with payment or face consequences. That would explain why he needed the money quickly, Naomi mused, pouring more tea into Owen's cup. But how did he get the key? That's where things get interesting. Owen leaned forward. According to the livery boy, James returned to town secretly the night before you counted the donations. Stayed at his father's house for less than a day, then left again. So he could have taken the key from his father and returned it before anyone noticed, Naomi said, the pieces falling into place. And more importantly, Owen added, the stagecoach driver confirmed James was carrying a heavy satchel when he boarded headed west, which he hadn't had when arriving in town. Naomi set down her teacup with a clink. Owen, this is it. If we take all this to Marshal Dawson, not yet, he cautioned. We need something more concrete. These are still circumstantial connections that Pullman could explain away. Her face fell. Then what more can we do? Owen was quiet for a moment, his eyes studying the rain outside. Pullman keeps his business ledgers in his office at the Mercantile. If James recorded the missing funds as a loan or payment, there might be evidence there. You're not suggesting breaking in? Naomi asked, alarmed. Not breaking in, but I might need to examine those books when no one's watching. He turned back to her, which means I need a distraction tomorrow evening when Pullman's closing up shop. What kind of distraction? The kind only a lady like yourself could provide. Owen's eyes held a glint of mischief that transformed his serious face. How would you feel about needing urgent assistance from Mr. Pullman just as he's locking up? Despite her anxiety, Naomi found herself smiling at his daring. I suppose I could manage that, though I'm not sure what urgent need would bring me to a man who's accused me of theft. I've noticed Mrs. Pullman always wears the finest dresses in town, Owen observed. Perhaps you received a special order of fabric that would make a dress to outshine all others at the Founders' Day celebration. That might work, Naomi conceded. Her vanity often overrides her husband's good sense. They spent the next hour refining their plan, and Naomi realized with surprise how comfortable she felt in Owen's company. In the short time she'd known him, he'd become someone she trusted implicitly, perhaps the only person in Willow Creek she could say that about. As Owen was preparing to leave, the rain having slowed to a drizzle, Naomi gathered her courage. "May I ask you something personal?" she said. He nodded, his expression open. "What will you do once this is resolved? Will you move on to the next town, the next person in trouble?" Something shifted in his eyes, a warmth that hadn't been there before. "I haven't thought that far ahead. For now, I'm right where I need to be." The next evening, Naomi approached Pullman's Mercantile with her heart pounding against her ribs. She'd put on her best dress, a deep green that complemented her chestnut hair, and carried a small parcel wrapped in brown paper. Through the window, she could see Mr. Pullman counting the day's receipts. Mrs. Pullman had already gone home, which was perfect for their plan. As the last customer left, Naomi took a deep breath and entered, the bell above the door announcing her presence. Pullman looked up, his expression hardening when he saw her. "Miss Foster, we're closed." "I apologize for the late hour, Mr. Pullman," she said, forcing warmth into her voice. "But I've received something I thought Mrs. Pullman would be interested in seeing immediately." His eyes narrowed with suspicion. "And what might that be?" Naomi unwrapped the parcel, revealing a length of exquisite silk brocade in deep burgundy. It was one of her most expensive fabrics, one she'd been saving for a special order. "This arrived on today's stage from San Francisco," she explained, spreading it across the counter. "There's only enough for one dress, and I know how Mrs. Pullman appreciates fine things. I thought I should offer it to her before anyone else, despite our recent misunderstanding." Pullman's greedy eyes fixed on the fabric, his fingers reaching out to touch the rich texture. "This is quite fine indeed. It would make a spectacular gown for the Founders' Day celebration," Naomi continued, aware that every second she kept him talking was another second for Owen to search the office at the back of the store. Mrs. Pullman would certainly stand out. "My wife has been concerned about what to wear," Pullman admitted, his tone softening slightly. "How much are you asking for it?" Naomi named a price well below its value, watching Pullman's interest grow. As she'd hoped, his wife's vanity was proving stronger than his animosity toward her. "Perhaps I should fetch Margaret to see it," he mused. "She's particular about her colors." "An excellent idea," Naomi agreed quickly. "I can wait here while you go." He hesitated, glancing toward his office. "I need to finish counting the register first, of course." Naomi rearranged the fabric, deliberately letting it cascade over the edge of the counter. "The light is better near the window. May I show you how it catches the evening sun?" As she drew him toward the front of the store, she caught a glimpse of movement near the office door, Owen slipping inside while Pullman's back was turned. For the next 15 minutes, Naomi discussed patterns and styles, asking Pullman detailed questions about his wife's preferences that kept him engaged and away from the office. When she finally saw Owen emerge silently and slip out the back door, she wrapped up the fabric. "I'll bring it by your home tomorrow for Mrs. Pullman to see," she said brightly. "Thank you for your time, Mr. Pullman." He seemed almost confused by her departure after such enthusiasm, but nodded curtly. "Until tomorrow, then." Naomi walked calmly out of the store, maintaining her composure until she'd turned the corner. Then she hurried toward the meeting place she and Owen had arranged, the small alley behind Dr. Parker's office. Owen was waiting in the shadows, his expression grim. "Did you find anything?" she asked breathlessly. He pulled a folded paper from his vest pocket. "More than I expected. This is a copy of an entry in Pullman's private ledger dated the day before the money was reported missing." Naomi unfolded the paper and read by the fading light. "Loan to JP. For Western investment opportunity $500. He recorded it," she whispered in disbelief. "He actually recorded giving the money to his son." "Not just that." Owen pointed to another notation he'd copied. "Look at this entry from the next day." The second note read, "Insurance claim filed, theft of store funds." He filed an insurance claim. Naomi's eyes widened. "So he not only blamed me to cover for his son, but he's trying to collect insurance money for the same funds he gave away." Owen nodded grimly. "He's committing fraud, Miss Foster, and using your reputation as the sacrifice." "We need to take this to Marshal Dawson immediately," Naomi said, starting to turn. Owen caught her arm gently. "We will, but there's something else you should know. I found letters in his desk correspondence with the railroad company. Pullman invested heavily in land he thought the railroad would need, but they've changed their route. He's nearly bankrupt. So the missing funds weren't just about covering his son's gambling debts," Naomi realized. "He needed the insurance money himself." "A desperate man will go to desperate lengths," Owen said quietly, "including destroying an innocent woman's reputation." As they walked toward the marshal's office, Naomi felt Owen's hand brush against hers, not quite holding it, but offering support nonetheless. The simple gesture warmed her more than she could explain. "Whatever happens," he said softly, "I won't let you face it alone." Marshal Dawson was skeptical at first, but the evidence was compelling. The ledger entry Owen had copied, combined with the telegraph records showing urgent messages to James Pullman in Silver Creek, and the stagecoach driver's testimony about James's suspicious travel patterns, created a picture that couldn't be ignored. "I'll need to verify these claims," the marshal said, studying the papers spread across his desk, "and I'll need to speak with Pullman directly." "He'll deny everything," Naomi warned. "Perhaps." Dawson stroked his mustache thoughtfully. "But if we bring in the insurance company investigator, things might look different. Fraud is a serious charge, Miss Foster." As they left the marshal's office, Naomi felt a strange mix of vindication and dread. "What happens now?" she asked Owen as they walked through the quiet streets. "Now we wait. The marshal is a fair man, despite his initial assumptions. He'll follow the evidence." "And if he doesn't?" She couldn't help voicing her fear. Owen stopped walking, turning to face her fully in the moonlight. "Then we'll find another way." I promise you, Naomi, your name will be cleared. It was the first time he'd used her given name, and the intimacy of it sent a flutter through her chest. Thank you, she whispered, not just for helping me, but for believing me when no one else would. Something shifted in his expression, then a softening around his eyes, a slight parting of his lips. For a breathless moment, Naomi thought he might kiss her, right there on the moonlit street. Instead, he gently tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, his fingers lingering against her cheek. Some truths don't need evidence, he said softly. They're written plain as day on a person's face. The next morning brought chaos to Willow Creek. Marshal Dawson, accompanied by the county sheriff and an insurance investigator who happened to be in a neighboring town, had arrived at Pullman's home at dawn. By mid-morning, the news had spread like wildfire. George Pullman had been arrested for fraud and false accusation. According to reports that grew more dramatic with each telling, Pullman had broken down under questioning, admitting he'd given the money to his son to pay gambling debts, then filed a false insurance claim and blamed Naomi to cover his tracks. The town that had shunned her now buzzed with embarrassed apologies and revised opinions. People who had crossed the street to avoid her yesterday now stopped by her shop to express their regret and assure her they'd always had doubts about Pullman's story. Naomi accepted their words graciously, though she noted which neighbors had stood by her and which had been quickest to condemn. Dr. Parker and Mrs. Winters, who had supported her throughout, were welcomed warmly. Others received polite but reserved responses. Owen kept a respectful distance as the town made its amends, watching from across the street as customers suddenly remembered dress orders they needed to place and fabrics they wished to purchase. When the flow of visitors finally ebbed in the late afternoon, he crossed to her shop, finding her sitting exhausted but smiling behind her counter. Quite a day, he observed, removing his hat. Indeed. She gestured to the orders stacked neatly beside her. Apparently everyone in town suddenly needs new clothes. Guilt is expensive, he remarked with a wry smile. Naomi laughed, the sound light and free in a way it hadn't been since the accusations began. Marshal Dawson came by earlier. He apologized quite sincerely and said the committee funds have been recovered from Pullman's personal account. Good, and what of James Pullman? A telegram has been sent to authorities in Sacramento to detain him. Though I suspect his father's connections may still shield him from the worst consequences. Owen nodded, unsurprised. The powerful rarely face the same justice as the rest of us. A comfortable silence fell between them, filled with unspoken questions about what would happen next. Owen shifted his weight, his normally confident demeanor suddenly uncertain. I should be moving on, he said finally. Now that your name is cleared. Naomi felt her heart sink. She'd known this moment would come. Owen Reid was not a man who stayed in one place long, but the prospect of his departure left her feeling hollow. Where will you go? She asked, struggling to keep her voice neutral. Hadn't thought that far ahead. He traced the brim of his hat with his fingers. Maybe north to Montana Territory. Heard they need good ranch hands there. I see. She busied herself organizing thread spools to hide her disappointment. Well, I'm grateful for everything you've done. I don't know how I can ever repay you. No repayment necessary. His eyes found hers warm and sincere. Seeing justice done is payment enough. Another silence stretched between them, heavy with things unsaid. Finally, Owen cleared his throat. I was thinking of staying through the Founders' Day celebration, he added. Since I've heard so much about it, might as well see if it lives up to the excitement. Hope flickered in Naomi's chest. That's still 2 weeks away, is it? He smiled slowly. Well, I suppose I could find ways to keep busy until then. I'm sure you could, she agreed, returning his smile. In fact, I've been thinking about some repairs my shop needs. The roof leaks something terrible when it rains. Happens I'm handy with a hammer. His eyes crinkled at the corners. And I've been wondering if you might consider having dinner with me tonight. To celebrate your good name being restored. Naomi felt a blush warm her cheeks. I believe I could be persuaded, Mr. Reid. Owen, he corrected gently. After all we've been through, I think we're well past formalities, Naomi. The way he said her name made her pulse quicken. "Owen," she repeated. "Dinner would be lovely." As he left to make arrangements, promising to return at sunset, Naomi found herself watching his retreating figure with a mixture of gratitude and something deeper, something that felt dangerously like the beginning of love. That evening marked the first of many they would spend together in the coming days. Owen rented a room above the livery stable and split his time between helping around Naomi's shop and taking odd jobs around town. True to his word, he fixed her leaky roof, rebuilt her sagging porch steps, and constructed new shelves for her expanding inventory as business returned to normal. Willow Creek, eager to make amends for its hasty judgment, embraced Owen as Naomi's defender. The story of how he'd methodically uncovered Pullman's deception grew with each telling, transforming him from mysterious drifter to heroic champion of justice. For his part, Owen seemed uncomfortable with the attention, preferring quiet evenings with Naomi to the slaps on the back he received at the saloon. During those evenings, over simple meals at her small table or walks along the creek that gave the town its name, they slowly shared the stories of their lives. Naomi told him about growing up in Philadelphia, the daughter of a tailor who had taught her his craft. How after her parents died of influenza, she decided to start fresh in the West, away from painful memories, and a suitor who saw her inheritance as more appealing than her companionship. Owen spoke of his childhood on a small farm in Missouri, his years driving cattle in Texas, and the sister whose fate had set him wandering, looking for wrongs to right. He talked about the beauty of Montana's Big Sky country, which he'd seen once and never forgotten. "It's a place where a man can breathe," he explained one evening as they sat on her porch watching fireflies dance in the gathering dusk. "Where the land stretches so far you can almost see tomorrow coming." "It sounds wonderful," Naomi said, trying to ignore the pang she felt at the thought of him leaving for such a place. "It is." He turned to look at her, his expression thoughtful. "Though lately I've been wondering if having room to breathe matters as much as having the right person to share the air with." The statement hung between them, rich with implication. Naomi's heart beat faster as his hand found hers in the fading light, his calloused fingers intertwining with her own. "Owen," she began, not certain what she wanted to say, only knowing that something important was shifting between them. Before she could continue, the sound of approaching footsteps broke the moment. They turned to see Marshal Dawson coming up the walk, his expression grave. "Evening, Miss Foster, Mr. Reid," he greeted them, touching the brim of his hat. "Sorry to interrupt, but I thought you should hear this news directly from me rather than through town gossip." "What's happened?" Owen asked, not releasing Naomi's hand. "George Pullman hanged himself in his cell last night," the marshal said quietly. "Left a confession letter clearing Miss Foster completely and admitting to years of financial improprieties." Naomi gasped, shock washing through her. Despite everything Pullman had done, she had never wished such a terrible end for him. And Mrs. Pullman? She asked, thinking of the proud woman now left alone. "Staying with her sister in Denver," Dawson replied. "The mercantile will be sold to settle debts. As for James, he was arrested in Sacramento, but with his father's death." The marshal shrugged. "Likely he'll avoid serious consequences." After the marshal left, Naomi sat in stunned silence, trying to process the tragic turn of events. Owen's arm came around her shoulders, solid and comforting. "This isn't your fault," he said gently, as if reading her thoughts. "Pullman made his choices long before you came to town." "I know," she whispered, "but it's still a terrible thing, his whole life destroyed by pride and secrets." "Some men build their lives on shifting sand," Owen observed. "When the tide comes in, there's nothing solid to hold them up." They sat together as darkness fell completely, the weight of Pullman's fate casting a somber shadow over what had been a joyful evening. Yet even in that darkness, Naomi found herself drawing strength from Owen's presence, from the steady rhythm of his breathing and the unwavering support of his arm around her. Whatever came next, she knew with sudden clarity that she wanted to face it with this man beside her. The Founders' Day celebration arrived with perfect weather and mixed emotions throughout Willow Creek. The committee had debated canceling in light of recent events, but ultimately decided the town needed healing and unity more than ever. Naomi, reinstated as treasurer with profuse apologies, threw herself into the preparations. The town square was transformed with bunting and banners, tables groaned under the weight of potluck dishes, and a small stage was erected for music and speeches. As she arranged flowers for the centerpieces, Naomi caught sight of Owen across the square, helping to set up games for the children. The past 2 weeks had seen their relationship deepen in ways that both thrilled and frightened her. Each evening spent in his company made the prospect of his eventual departure more painful to contemplate. "He looks at you like you're the sunrise after the longest night," observed Mrs. Winters, appearing at Naomi's side with more flowers. "I haven't seen a man so smitten since my Harold was courting me, God rest his soul." Naomi blushed. "We're just friends." "Poppycock," the elderly woman declared. "Friends don't look at each other the way you two do when you think no one's watching." "The question is, what are you going to do about it?" "He's planning to leave for Montana," Naomi admitted softly. "He's not a man who stays in one place long," Mrs. Winters snorted. "Men often don't know what they want until it's right in front of them. Sometimes they need a little help seeing clearly." Before Naomi could respond, the old woman had bustled away, leaving her to ponder those words as she finished the floral arrangements. The celebration began at noon, with the mayor's speech carefully edited to omit any mention of the committee funds drama, followed by music from a trio of fiddle players. Children raced in sack races and bobbed for apples, while adults competed in horseshoe tournaments and pie-eating contests. Naomi found herself surrounded by well-wishers, each eager to demonstrate they had never truly believed the accusations against her. She accepted their words graciously, though privately she noted the difference between those who had stood by her and those who had abandoned her at the first whisper of scandal. As the afternoon progressed, she kept finding her gaze drawn to Owen. He had shaved and worn his best shirt, a deep blue that matched his eyes, and something about seeing him so at ease among her neighbors made her heart ache with longing. When the dancing began at twilight, lanterns illuminating the square with golden light, Owen appeared at her side. "May I have this dance, Miss Foster?" he asked formally, though his eyes twinkled with private amusement. "You may, Mr. Reid," she replied, placing her hand in his outstretched palm. He led her into the circle of dancers as the fiddles struck up a lively tune. His hand at her waist was gentle but sure, guiding her through the steps with unexpected grace for such a tall man. "I didn't know you could dance," she said as they turned beneath the lantern light. "A man of many surprises," he replied, pulling her slightly closer than propriety strictly allowed. "I wanted tonight to be special." "It already is," she assured him, keenly aware of every place their bodies connected. As the evening wore on, they danced until Naomi's feet ached pleasantly, took a break to sample Mrs. Parker's famous apple cider, then returned to dance again as the music slowed to more intimate melodies. Under the stars, with Owen's arms around her, Naomi found herself wishing the night would never end. Tomorrow would bring decisions, separations, returns to normal life. But tonight was theirs, a perfect moment suspended in time. "Walk with me?" Owen murmured against her ear as the last dance ended. She nodded, allowing him to guide her away from the celebration toward the creek bank, where they had spent many evenings in conversation. The sounds of music and laughter faded behind them as they followed the moonlit path. When they reached a small clearing overlooking the water, Owen turned to face her, taking both her hands in his. "Naomi," he began, his voice lower and more serious than she'd ever heard it. "These past weeks have been the most meaningful of my life." Her heart fluttered in her chest. "For me as well." "I came to Willow Creek with no plans to stay," he continued. "Just passing through like I've been doing for years, never putting down roots, never letting myself get attached." "I understand," she said softly, preparing herself for the goodbye she'd been dreading. "No, I don't think you do." His thumbs traced gentle circles on her palms. Because what I'm trying to say rather poorly is that I don't want to leave, not without you. Naomi's breath caught. Owen. I've been thinking about Montana, he said. About that big sky country. There's land available for homesteading, good land near a growing town. A man could build something worthwhile there. It sounds wonderful, she whispered, hardly daring to hope where this was leading. It could be. His eyes held hers in the moonlight. But only if you were there too, only if we built it together. He released one of her hands to reach into his pocket, withdrawing a small object that gleamed in the moonlight, a simple gold ring. I'm not a wealthy man, Naomi. I can't offer you grand houses or fine things, but I can promise you this. I will spend every day building a home where your truth is enough, where you are believed, respected, and loved beyond measure. Tears welled in Naomi's eyes as he knelt before her, the ring held between them like a promise. Naomi Foster, would you do me the extraordinary honor of becoming my wife, of coming to Montana with me to build a new life together? Joy burst through her like sunshine after storm clouds. Yes, she breathed. Yes, Owen Reid, I will marry you. His smile was radiant as he slipped the ring onto her finger, a perfect fit, as though it had been waiting all along for this moment. When he rose and gathered her into his arms, his kiss was gentle at first, then deepening with a passion that made her dizzy with happiness. I love you, he murmured against her lips. Have since the moment you opened your door to me, standing so brave and defiant despite everything. And I love you, she replied, realizing the truth had been in her heart for weeks, for believing in me when belief was what I needed most. They returned to the celebration hand in hand, their news spreading quickly through the gathering. Congratulations showered around them, but Naomi barely heard the words, too absorbed in the miracle of Owen's hand holding hers, of the ring on her finger, of the future suddenly opening before them like a road bathed in morning light. 3 weeks later, a small wedding took place in Willow Creek's church. Dr. Parker gave the bride away, Mrs. Winters wept joyfully in the front pew, and even Marshall Dawson looked suspiciously misty-eyed as Naomi and Owen exchanged their vows. The dress shop was sold to a young widow eager for a fresh start, and Naomi's sewing machines and fabrics were carefully packed for the journey north. As the stagecoach prepared to carry them away, the town gathered to bid farewell to the woman they had wronged and the man who had fought for her truth. Write to us, Mrs. Winters insisted, pressing a package of cookies into Naomi's hands. Tell us about your Montana home. We will, Naomi promised, embracing the old woman who had stood by her through the darkest days. As the coach pulled away, Owen's arm secure around her shoulders, Naomi looked back at the town that had both broken and mended her heart. Willow Creek had taught her painful lessons about human nature, how quickly people could turn on one another, how desperately they would protect their own interests and reputations. But it had also brought her Owen, and for that she would always be grateful. Ready for our adventure, Mrs. Reid? Owen asked, his voice warm against her ear. Naomi turned from the past toward her future, meeting her husband's loving gaze. More than ready. The journey to Montana territory was long and arduous, but filled with the joy of new beginnings. They traveled by stagecoach, then riverboat, and finally by wagon alongside other homesteaders seeking their fortunes in the Northern Territory. By early autumn, they reached the valley Owen had described so vividly, a sweeping expanse of grassland nestled between distant purple mountains, with a clear river cutting through rich soil. A small but growing town called Promise sat at the valley's edge, offering the necessities of civilization while preserving the wild beauty that had drawn them north. Using the money from the sale of Naomi's shop, they purchased 160 acres under the Homestead Act land that rolled gently toward the mountains with a small creek running through it. What do you think? Owen asked as they stood on a rise overlooking their property. Can you see our home here? Naomi squeezed his hand, taking in the vastness of the sky above them. It's perfect. They lived in a tent while Owen, with help from neighboring homesteaders, built their cabin. Naomi established a vegetable garden and set up her sewing machine in the tent, quickly finding customers in Promise who were eager for skilled needlework. By the first snowfall, their cabin was complete a sturdy structure with 2 rooms, a stone fireplace, and windows Owen had carefully positioned to capture both sunrise and sunset. He'd built her a special corner with shelves for her fabrics and a work table positioned to catch the best light. "For your dressmaking," he explained as he showed her the space. "I thought you might want to continue your trade." Tears filled Naomi's eyes at his thoughtfulness. "It's wonderful, Owen, everything is." That first winter tested them with bitter cold and isolation, but they found joy in simple pleasures, reading aloud by firelight, planning spring plantings, and learning the rhythms of their shared life. When blizzards howled outside, they created their own warmth within the cabin walls, their love deepening with each passing day. Spring brought new beginnings. The land thawed, revealing rich soil eager for planting. Owen broke ground for larger fields, while Naomi expanded her garden and planted flower beds around the cabin. Her sewing business grew as word spread of her skill, with customers riding from miles around for her work. On their first anniversary, Owen surprised her with a sign he'd carved and painted for their gate, "Truth's Haven." "Because that's what we've built here," he explained as they stood arm in arm admiring it, "a place where truth is enough, where we stand by each other no matter what." "It's perfect," Naomi whispered, thinking of how far they'd come from those dark days in Willow Creek. As the years passed, Truth's Haven grew and flourished. Owen proved himself a capable rancher, gradually building a respectable herd of cattle that thrived on the rich grassland. Naomi's dressmaking business expanded until she needed a separate building adjacent to the cabin, a light-filled studio where she could work and teach the craft to young women from promise. Their family grew too. In their 3rd year of marriage, Naomi gave birth to a daughter they named Elizabeth, after Owen's sister. 2 years later came Samuel, a sturdy boy with his father's blue eyes and his mother's determined spirit. The cabin expanded with each child, Owen adding rooms with the same careful attention to detail he'd shown in the original structure. They remained connected to Willow Creek through letters. Mrs. Winters wrote monthly until her peaceful passing at age 92, Dr. Parker sent occasional medical advice and news of the town's changes. Even Marshal Dawson corresponded now and then, keeping them informed of events including the eventual arrest of James Pullman for new frauds in California. The truth of what had happened in Willow Creek was never hidden from their children. As Elizabeth and Samuel grew old enough to understand, Owen and Naomi shared their story not as a tale of bitterness, but as a lesson in standing firm for truth and building life on solid foundations. "Sometimes people will believe what's convenient rather than what's true," Naomi explained to 13-year-old Elizabeth one evening as they sewed together. "What matters is that you know your own truth and hold to it. Like you did, Mama." The girl asked, her fingers carefully guiding the needle through fabric. "Like we both did," Naomi corrected, smiling across the room at Owen, who was teaching Samuel to carve wood by the fireplace. "Your father taught me that one person's belief can be enough to weather any storm." On their 20th anniversary, with their children nearly grown and Truth's Haven established as one of the most prosperous ranches in the valley, Owen and Naomi stood once again on the rise where they had first viewed their land. "Do you ever regret it?" Owen asked, his arm around her waist. His hair was touched with silver now, the lines around his eyes deeper, but his gaze was as clear and loving as ever. "Leaving everything behind to come here with me." Naomi leaned her head against his shoulder, taking in the view before them, the sprawling ranch house that had grown from their simple cabin, the barns and outbuildings, the fields where cattle grazed peacefully, and beyond it all, the endless Montana sky. "Not for a single moment," she assured him. "You promised me a home where truth was enough, and you've given me that and so much more." "Truth and love," Owen mused, pressing a kiss to her temple. "Turns out they're the only foundations worth building on." As the sun set over Truth's Haven, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and purples, Naomi reflected on the journey that had brought them here, from accusation and despair to vindication and hope. from strangers united by injustice to partners bound by deepest love. They had built something precious together, not just a ranch, not just a family, but a place where truth and love prevailed over lies and fear. A haven in a world that often preferred comfortable falsehoods to difficult truths. "I was thinking," Owen said as they turned toward home, the lights of their ranch house welcoming in the gathering dusk. "Perhaps we should visit Willow Creek next spring, show the children where our story began." "I'd like that," Naomi agreed, imagining standing in her old shop with Elizabeth and Samuel, helping them understand the full circle of their parents' journey. "After all, without Willow Creek, we might never have found each other." "Then I'm grateful for it," Owen said simply. "For every part of our path, even the painful ones, they all led us here." As they walked hand in hand toward the home, they had built together a home founded on truth, strengthened by love, and enriched by the family they had created. Naomi knew with absolute certainty that this was exactly where she was meant to be. The accusation that had once threatened to destroy her had instead set her free, guiding her to a man who believed in her when no one else would, to a love that transformed them both, and to a home where truth would always, always be enough.